Welcome to the City Club of Eugene's May 6, 2022 program. We're glad you're here. Today is Candidate Forum, Republican Candidates for House Districts 12 and 14. This is the 29th program in our 21-22 programming year. I'm Kitty Piercy, and I'm the president of City Club, and as I like to say, I'm proud of it. Support for the City Club is provided by our members and sponsors. You can become a member of the City Club at our website, cityclubofeugene.org. This program is live streamed to our YouTube channel and archived there and on our Facebook page. Our podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts. Programs are broadcast on public radio station KLCC on Monday nights at 7. We have both business and in-kind sponsors. Our diamond sponsors are Kaiser Permanente, University of Oregon, Peace Health, and Lane Community College. And we get generous support from the City of Eugene and from Lane County. Our format today includes a question and answer period with City Club members and non-members alike via live stream and text. The texting number to submit your question will appear at the bottom of your screen during the intermission. We're not having an intermission, during the Q&A period. In today's Republican Candidate Forum for House Districts 12 and 14, the candidates for House District 12 are Charles Conrad. You can probably nod you've got a sign in front of you right there. Yep. Nicole Mcgrath, Jeff Gowing, Bill Ledford, who is not present at the moment, and for House District 14, Caleb Clark. Stan Sebelfield is also a candidate for the Republican nomination in House District 14, but could not be here. We also want to thank our moderator, Rachel McDonald, KLCC's new director. Thank you for being here. Biographical information on our speakers is available on our website, cityclubofeugene.org. I would like to thank Joel Korn for coordinating today's program. So many legislative races in the Willamette Valley are uncontested in this year's primary election, but there are two notable exceptions. The newly redrawn House District 12 includes parts of Eugene, Springfield, Pleasant Hill, and the towns of Junction City, Coburg, Cresswell, West Fur, Lowell, Cottage Grove, Dexter, Oak Ridge, and Marcola. 4 Republicans are vying to run against Democrat Michelle Emmons. House District 14 includes West Eugene and stretches west to Veneta and Elmira and north to portions of Junction City. 2 Republicans are seeking nomination to run against incumbent Democrat Julie Fahey, and 1 accepted the invitation to this forum, and we're glad he did. Although this forum deals primarily with only the Republican candidates seeking the nomination, we will feature both Republican and Democrat candidates for legislative races in the fall, prior to the general election. The forum hosted by KLCC News Director Rachel McDonald will cover local and state issues that these candidates will face if elected in November. Questions should be written out on cards provided at your table, or at your seat, I guess. And hold up the card when you have a question and someone will collect it. If you're watching the live stream, questions may be texted to the number that appears at the bottom of the screen when the questioning begins. All questions will be screened for fairness. Ms. McDonald of KLCC will have the ultimate say in which questions get asked. And now I'm going to turn it over to her. Thanks, Rachel. Well, I have to give her the mic or she will never be able to do this.
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel McDonald, News Director at KLCC, and thank you so much for joining us for this forum with Republican candidates for House Districts 12 and 14. We will have 2 minutes each for you to give opening statements, and then we'll get to questions, and each of you will have 1 minute to answer. Joel will be giving you the signal for time, and we'll try to keep to that so everyone gets equal time. And at the conclusion, each of you will have 1 minute for a closing statement. Okay, let's go ahead with opening statements, and we'll start with you, Caleb Clark, for House District 14.
Thank you.
And go ahead and get close to that microphone.
Is that good? All right. Good afternoon. I'm Caleb Clark, running for House District 14. Myself and 3 other incredible people took on the challenge of running the PTO at my son's school when he started kindergarten at the height of COVID. Our challenges were many, but we persevered and restructured fundraisers to fit with state restrictions and even started new fundraisers to do everything we could to support the teachers and the school when district restrictions were at their highest. We're very excited to be able to fund field trips and student-centered school improvements in the coming year. My experience on the PTO led me to run for the Bethel School Board, where I was elected and continue to serve. I'm very pleased with the success we've had there, navigating COVID restrictions and creating a seamless return to school. As a general contractor, serving on the Bond Oversight Committee is one of the challenging privileges I'm honored to have there, and I look forward to representing the Bethel community in that capacity. Bethel is a tight-knit community, and its engagement with the board is truly inspiring. Seeing the disparity in trust when comparing the Bethel School Board with District 14's current representative to the House is what prompted me to run for the state legislature. I seek to foster that same trust and engagement in District 14 through transparency and availability. Together, we'll tackle the issues that are of most importance to our community. These include tax reform, landowner incentives in light of recent and future zoning changes, transparent funding of civil services, addressing the increase in property crime, and better management of our natural resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will hear from Jeff Gowing, who is running for House District 12.
I'm Jeff Gowing. I'm a native Grover. I graduated from high school in 1980. I'm a fourth generation graduate of Cottage Grove High. I joined the Army 2 years after high school and served 6 years in the United States Army, came home, decided this was a good place to raise my family, and I started working at Weyerhaeuser in 1989. I got appointed to City Council in 2009, served on council till 2016. In 2017, I ran for mayor, and I've been serving as Cottage Grove mayor ever since. This year, I'm the president of the Oregon Mayors Association for all of Oregon. I was going to be done with being mayor and retire, and I had people in the community ask me to step up and run for state legislation. After looking at what was happening, there was so many laws and things being passed down, unfunded mandates, that I felt that there's a lot of lack of local government at the state level, and they need to be better in tune with that. So that's where I want to spend my time, is focusing on addressing the housing crisis, the homeless issue, transportation. All of those are important, and when you put the burden of the small communities to take care of that, it's really hard when they don't have the financial resources to do that. So that's why I decided to go for state legislation.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Charlie Conrad, who's running for House District 12.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Charlie Conrad. I'm running for House District 12. What I'd like to do is start off with a little bit of my background, because that, I think, really helps inform what I see the future for Oregon and what I would like to do at the state legislature. I've been a public employee now for 23 years. Started off in 1998 at Sheriff's Department, working in Lane County Jail. I worked at Springfield Police Department for 14 years after that. I was a research coordinator up at the League of Oregon Cities. Now I'm back down at Lane County. I've been at Lane County for 6 years now, in a couple different positions. During that time, one of the things that has really been impressed upon me is the need for planning, for having a purpose, and for having a goal. And that's one of the things that I see this state lacking, is to have a master plan, a long-range plan, so that we've got a direction and we've got a way to get there and to achieve what we need to achieve. One of the things I would like to work on is developing that, to work with whoever the new governor is, to work with the new legislature, and to be able to develop that long-range plan so that we as a state know where we're going to go, that we know how we're going to get there, and that as legislators, we know what legislation we need to pass, what legislation we might need to repeal, and what legislation we need to be tweaked. Additionally, with that, the agencies at the state level then will know, what do they need to do during the rulemaking process, and what the goal of the legislation is. That is one of the things that is severely lacking, and it's one of the things I would like to change. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from Nicole Mcgrath, who is also running for House District 12.
Yes, I'm Nicole Mcgrath, and I was also raised in Cottage Grove, graduated there. After attending college and living overseas, running a ranch and a small business, we returned 8 years ago to raise our kids in the same area. I worked in the real estate industry. I'm running because I want to serve my community. I do see unprecedented problems. I know COVID highlighted a lot of those issues we see in society, whether that's education or lack of credibility in the government. And I feel like we need to be able to trust our government. I think we talk about apathy, but I think that people have just thought for so long they could trust their legislators, that they were just in office to do the best work. And then somewhere along the lines, the lack of trustworthiness came in, whether it's through secret meetings. There's task force right now that are meeting, and some of those meetings are public, but some of them are private. And so I would like to help with a lack of credibility in government. I feel like we can do better, and I know there's surveys out there that show that the majority of Oregonians think that we're heading the wrong direction. And whether or not we agree on why those reasons for going the wrong direction, I think we can look at the common ground issues. There's going to be issues we disagree on, and we all have strong feelings about, but I am open to hearing and learning from all perspectives. During this forum, my answers will be framed using past legislation and how I would oppose it or support it based on how it specifically matches what the makeup of my district is. It's a legislator's job to make policies and revise old ones, but at the end of the day, the key is representation. So I will give my answers through the lens of my values and show you where I see problems, but also solutions that we can come up with. I do have a heart for future generations, and I feel like District 12 needs me as a legislator.
Thank you. Now it's time for questions, and we will start with Jeff Gowing, running for House District 12. We'll be doing this in a rotating order just to keep it fair. So you'll have 1 minute. And the first question is, Oregon is still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. How well do you think the state legislature managed the pandemic, and what would you do differently?
At first, I think the state did the best job they could do from what hand they were dealt to start off with. As it went through, there was so much misinformation and a lack of consistency that I think that's where they failed. Sticking with a plan and sticking to it would have been better, but the masks work, masks don't work, we're masked now. It was just too unclear. There needed to be a better direction and a consistent leadership.
Okay, thank you. Charlie, same question for you. How well do you think the state legislature managed the pandemic, and what would you do differently?
Fortunately, one of the things I was able to do is work at the Lane County COVID Emergency Operations Center for part of 2020 and 2021. So I was able to operationalize firsthand some of what the governor was handing down, some of what the legislature was doing. And in the very outset, back in March of 2020, for the first 3 months as we're gaining information and knowledge, I thought the state did well. You need to have a holding period, and you need to learn as much as you can about the process, what's going on, what the infection rate is. But as we gain that information and knowledge, the policies and practices failed to change. What I would have loved to have seen is for the state to come forward with the 5 or 6 goals, the framework for businesses to open, and to allow businesses to open based off that framework, based off their clientele, their footprint, what their risks are, and to adhere to that. I would like the state to be able to trust business owners, to be able to run their own businesses and earn a living. So overall, at the back end, I don't think the legislature did a good job.
Thank you. Nicole, same question for you. To how well do you think the state legislature managed the pandemic, and what would you do differently?
That's a good question, because I don't think the state legislature had much to do with a lot of the top-heavy restriction and the mandates that came down from Kate Brown, and I don't feel like she had a collaborative approach at all with the legislators. I feel like there's too many inconsistencies and hypocrisy, and I think people are really upset about that. But just a little story, 2 words, personal responsibility. When March 16 came and the schools had already been closed down and everybody was confused and a lot of people were scared, I went to church and I noticed everybody was naturally distanced. So the church was half empty and the people that were afraid stayed home, and the people, the ones that were there like I was, there was a sermon on love. And so when I saw somebody at the store that was wearing a mask, I just gave them extra space, and I told my kids to do the same. But I just feel like we led with fear, and too much pitting neighbor against neighbor was happening, and we didn't take into account mental health issues and business closures, and I am 100% against mandates. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Caleb, same question for you. How well do you think the state legislature managed the pandemic, and what would you do differently?
A lot of the decisions made by the legislature were very slow to change with new information, and we're still seeing some of that today, especially as it applies to schools and funding. The framework that was presented was not flexible and didn't scale well, and the resort to mandates created a consistency problem throughout the community, and especially in schools, which is where I saw the most effect of the mandates and legislation pitting against each other. Whatever is designed has to be able to scale, and we didn't see that happen. So while it may have worked in the beginning, it did not continue to work that way.
So now we will start with Charlie on this question, and this is about the economy, which is also still recovering from the pandemic, and now we're coping with rising inflation and gas prices due to global circumstances, including the war in Ukraine. How would you address the economic challenges we're facing?
The economic challenges that we have right now, a lot of it are due to global and national factors that we don't have exact control over. We can just try and mitigate the impact on our state. And some of that is going to be looking forward to how can we be more resilient? How can we shorten supply chains? How can we ensure that we have living wage jobs for people so that they can weather the inflation, particularly as the Fed keeps raising interest rates. Don't know how much higher this is going to go and when it's going to stop. So a lot of this is building resiliency for the future and working with the businesses that we have to retain them and ensure that we can take care of our employees.
And Nicole, same question for you. How would you address the economic challenges we're facing?
Thank you. I think the economic challenges vary in small towns and rurals, and maybe it does in urban centers. And I had this phrase on my palm card when I was door knocking, and it said something about the economy. And there was 2 gentlemen outside when I was door knocking, and one was moving. And he looked at my card and said, "Thank you." And he said, "What are you going to do about the economy?" And he's like, "I'm practically homeless, and I have to move down to Reedsport because I can't afford to live in Cottage Grove anymore." And so we did discuss the economy and all the things that are affecting all of us. People that commute from Cottage Grove and Oak Ridge, they have higher fuel prices. I think the government needs to sort of get out of the way a little bit as far as looking at areas that really do affect the everyday person's pocketbook. And I would like to see just more listening to rural and small town municipalities and seeing what is affecting each area and working with them on that.
Okay, thank you. And now, Caleb, same question for you. How would you address the economic challenges we're facing?
I think a key area that we can make a change right now would be tax reform, especially for landowners who are dealing with the changes in zoning requirements and the loosening of those to allow for tiny homes and things like that that can also help with the housing crisis. So allowing people to keep more of the money they already have instead of these stimulus packages and things that have really put us in the position we're in now without the backup plan to deal with the fallout from those. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you. And same question for you, Jeff. How would you address the economic challenges we're facing?
I think a lot of it, it is the global supply demand is causing a lot of our problems, but our workforce is a problem too. Prior to COVID, everybody seemed to be working, and when they had the option to not work, a lot of them didn't, and now everybody has an employee shortage, and it doesn't seem to matter what industry that you're at, is you have an employee shortage. And so we need to figure out why the people aren't back to work and try to get them back in there, because when you've got a workforce that's working and spending money, it's going to make the whole community as a whole thrive.
Thank you very much. Well, next question, Nicole, you get to start, and it's people in Oregon's rural areas often feel overlooked by state government. How would you help to bridge the urban-rural divide and to fully represent your district?
Yes, I think, rural needs they differ from the ideas of urban counterparts, and, we all benefit from using our natural resources, so they fund things like schools, and, we need to remember that working folks in rural areas do have skin in the game. We need to as I said, we need to listen a little bit better. One thing about the state legislature is when bills come up, you have few opportunities to go and speak at a public hearing, and I would like to see more education in getting the public involved, because I know a lot of people complain, and first of all, you can't complain if you don't vote, so please vote. But sometimes you need to be a little bit more involved in issues that are affecting rural counterparts, and the legislature needs to remember not to overlook their voice, because, I trust a lot of people in different industries, because they're the ones that are working day to day in their sector, and they know best what's going to affect their lives and their jobs.
Thank you very much. And Caleb, same question for you. How would you help to bridge the urban-rural divide and fully represent your district?
District 14 is one of those that does span over farmland and dense housing, old housing, and a lot of things in between. So it's a very inclusive district that way, and where you've got a reservoir right in the middle that we all have to share and manage. So feeling represented is about being able to reach out to your representative and have those discussions about things. So that is my main goal, is to be available, to be transparent, and to be able to listen to everyone individually and as a collective to create that community that I want to see and want to represent.
And Jeff, again for you, how would you help to bridge the urban-rural divide and fully represent your district?
I've been dealing with that my whole time as mayor, because we are a rural community, and it seems that we get a bunch of legislative things that we have to deal with that is how they deal with it in Portland, but yet they want us to implement it in Cottage Grove. And so there is not a one-size-fits-all, and it's making the relationships and talking with other people across the state to make a conscious decision that best suits the whole community, and have a lot more local control in those. So they need to be more flexible on the wording, so it's not just this is what you have to do, it's make it work for your community the best you can.
And Charlie, also, how would you help to bridge the urban-rural divide and fully represent your district?
The urban-rural divide runs akin to the current divide that we have in the legislature between Democrats and Republicans. And to bridge both those divides, it comes down to, you need somebody that's a champion, that has energy and the passion, and can work on influencing folks on the other side of the aisle and people that work in larger cities. And a lot of that will come from being pragmatic, being practical, having reasoned arguments, and coming forward with solutions that will help with that. And a lot of that comes to our Oregon Constitution, allowing home rule authority for our local communities, so that there is not a one-size-fits-all solution, and that rural and local smaller communities can enact legislation and ordinances that meet with their local culture, their history, and what those citizens actually want.
Thank you. Next question, and we're going to be starting with you, Caleb. Homelessness and housing insecurity affect communities throughout Oregon. How can the legislature improve access to affordable housing and address the underlying problems that lead to homelessness?
The changes in zoning that's been going through and will be continue to be changing over the next couple of years, I think will play a big part in that. We're seeing a lot of the housing market going up right now, and people are selling to large corporations, and I think incentives from the legislature to landowners for tiny homes, for splitting buildings into duplexes, and rewarding landowners that have chosen to take on the burden of being landlords will play a large part in helping the homeless crisis. It's not just about building new little houses, it's about creating a lasting effect and not punishing those people that have the ability to help with property taxes and raising those things.
Jeff, again, same question for you regarding homelessness and housing insecurity and how the legislature can improve access to affordable housing and address the problems that lead to homelessness.
So as president of the Oregon Mayors Association, I'm heading up a task force with myself and 24 other mayors across the state of Oregon to work out a collaborative solution to take to legislative next year for funding to help solve the housing crisis, because again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. What works here in Eugene is not going to work in Junction City or Oak Ridge. So we need to come up with solutions that work for everybody, and to have the wraparound services to get the mental health issue that goes along with that, or the substance abuse, then we need to have those in place as well. But it's not an easy solution to solve, but I think we can get the right people in there to do it.
All right, thank you. And Charlie, same question. How can the legislature improve access to affordable housing and address underlying problems that lead to homelessness?
Thank you. The people are homeless for so many different reasons, and the resources that local and smaller communities have to provide varies throughout the state. One of the things that I experienced as a police officer, talking to people that were homeless and working through their issues and trying to provide assistance to them, is that the people that pull themselves out, homelessness, pull themselves out of drug addiction, they've had an epiphany. And what I would love to see is for the legislature to focus on programs and funding that for people that have had that epiphany, to pull them out, help them out, and then reach into the other one. Spending money on folks that have not had that epiphany, that are not ready and not willing to do the work to get them out of their situation, those are lost resources. I want to focus on the people that are ready and willing to do that hard work, because it is hard. It's hard on the people, and it's hard on the communities.
Thank you. Nicole, how can the legislature improve access to affordable housing and address the underlying problems that lead to homelessness?
Yeah, that's a big question. I don't know if I can answer that in 1 minute, but the access issue is don't create barriers to home ownership. Don't get rid of the mortgage interest rate deduction. Don't, like Cedric Hayden had a bill in 2019. It was to do a constitutional tax change so property owners that were seniors could have a moratorium on their increases. So don't create barriers for access to affordable housing. And affordable for us is different than maybe a Californian coming up using their money to, it's affordable to them there. Yesterday I was invited to a group, the residents of Cottage Grove were meeting to discuss the homelessness issue, and they had some homeless people invited, and it was very interesting. Some of them, I know there's one guy who he was homeless, but he had a job, so some want integration and some don't. Like this woman who was there, she listed all the service that she wanted, but she wasn't willing to go get counseling. She wasn't willing to get off drugs. And so, like I said, it's complicated, but Cottage Grove is doing things the way they're doing in urban towns, and I think they need to listen to the citizens.
Thank you. Okay, next question. We're going to be starting with you, Jeff. With wildfires and extreme weather events threatening Oregon communities, how should Oregon lawmakers approach issues related to climate change, and what is the state's role in protecting the environment?
I think that climate change is happening, and I think we have to adapt to it. The wildfire issue, I think, is a lot of it is poor management of the timber. Most of the forest fires that's happened in the last 5 or 10 years have started on state and federal land because of the laws on the logging and how they've left the timber industry. The timber companies aren't the ones that are having the fires start on their property because they are the ones out there managing their forest and keeping that dry brush that's under the underbrush that's catching fire and burning the timber. So we need to address it, and it needs to change.
Charlie, again, how should Oregon lawmakers approach issues related to climate change, and what is the state's role in protecting the environment?
I agree with Jeff. A lot of that comes down to managing the forest better, and the state legislature and the governor's office need to work together to identify the areas that are highest risk and start focusing efforts and resources on those areas. And those areas are certainly going to be rural communities that are surrounded by forests and forests that have not had any activity in them for a while. With that, part of my opening talked about a long-range plan. And certainly climate change would fit into a long-range plan for the state so that we know that we've got a resilient economy, so that we've got jobs that can be supported, that we know what the expectations are for preserving the environment, and that we can work with our agricultural community, our timber community, and that they can have some stability, and that they know what's going to be expected of them, and that we've got a plan working forward, and that they can implement that plan.
Okay, thank you. And Nicole, same question. How should Oregon lawmakers approach issues related to climate change, and what is the state's role in protecting the environment?
Yes, I think that we should all be good stewards of our land, and communities can review what levels of resiliency so there's some task force headed right now. Senate Bill 1518 has a task force, and then there's House Bill 4077, which is an Environment Justice Council, which I would have opposed because I don't think it's relevant to rural and small towns necessarily. But another area we can, other than, yes, forest management, and listen to loggers who are the most conservation-minded folks I've met. They know carbon capture, they know trees, and but the legislature had a chance to pass a bill to help retain and recruit volunteer firefighters, which rural areas really depend on, and they didn't prioritize that. So I'd like to see that happen next year, because our firefighters, when we were evacuated, they not only kept the fire from advancing, but looters came and they were helping look out for our properties. So we need to look at really realistic and applicable ways we can be prepared.
Right, thank you. And Caleb, same question for you. How should Oregon lawmakers approach issues related to climate change, and what is the state's role in protecting the environment?
As long as the state controls certain parts of the forest, they need to be good stewards of it, and that's potentially us. So focusing on better funding for LFA and other organizations for the firefighters and those that are going to be in wildland firefighting situations must be a priority. As well as better management on a day-to-day level of the forest that we have around us, because keeping that beautiful and useful for the future generations has to be a priority, because it does greatly affect us when that all goes up in flames. So that's got to be a main priority. And changing some of the legislation we've seen in the cap and trade legislation that's come through, I think, to ease the restriction on some of the smaller businesses and avoiding those large umbrella type legislation changes is going to help us move forward with that as well.
Okay, thank you. Next question, and this one we're going to start with Charlie. In recent years, Oregon lawmakers have debated ways to hold law enforcement accountable and protect the rights of people of color. What is the best way to strike a balance between the need for public safety and the civil liberties of Oregonians?
part of the conversation that's happened nationwide over the last few years concerning defunding the police department, doing those types of things, no, that will not work. But one of the things that is rising to the surface in the conversations out there is separating out some of the counseling type work that law enforcement does. And so that people that just need counseling, and I've did it for 14 years, whether it's family counseling, marriage counseling, learning how to parent a juvenile, getting people out there that can spend the time, that have those resources and are trained, and let police officers go out there and fight crime, chase the criminals, be active, and stop the criminals from creating more victims while giving the people that need some additional assistance that don't include handcuffs, get them the help that they need. So it's that combination of reform.
All right, thank you. And Nicole, also the same question, what is the best way to strike a balance between the need for public safety and the civil liberties of Oregonians?
I think both of those issues are very important. If a community needs to feel like they trust the law enforcement, but at the same time, it feels like what happened with George Floyd was a bit of a wide pendulum swing, and I think communities can work with the local police, and I think it's different for each area, and I think in speaking to a police officer who lives in a small town and doesn't necessarily see help from the state or counties, they are working hard, and I don't really think we should across the board defund police, but look at training. I know that we don't have enough sheriffs compared to what we should have, and so I think we need to balance. People need to be able, they can trust law enforcement, but law enforcement also need to know that they can do their jobs and have the tools and resources they need available when they need them.
And same question for you, Caleb. What is the best way to strike a balance between the need for public safety and civil liberties of Oregonians?
I think the biggest issue that the public has is accountability, and that's going to be key in striking a balance there, is that people feel that the officers are accountable for their actions, but I think oftentimes we just talk past each other on what that means, and when people say defund the police, they are often talking about splitting off services that are not necessarily in the purview of the police for counseling and things like that. So I think he said it very well. Looking at that balance is going to be key in making sure that people feel that the accountability is there and that everyone is doing the job that they should be doing instead of being asked to do things that is outside of their professional abilities or really what should be in their expectations.
And Jeff, also same question for you. What is the best way to strike a balance between the need for public safety and the civil liberties of Oregonians?
I think a lot of it is accountability, and it's training, making sure the officers are trained well enough to recognize the situation. It's bridging that community and police officers. We do a thing in Cottage Grove every year. We call it Kicking It with the Cops, and I barbecue hot dogs for the community. It's a free event. The police officers are in the parking lot. They have all their fancy Humvees and tools out there, dunk tanks, and just letting the community mingle with the cops and let them know that they're real people and they have real families and they're not out there to be an evil person against them. They're just out to uphold the laws that we have in the city. And so I think doing something like that across the board would be really good for all police departments.
All right, thank you. Next question, and this one is from the audience, and we're going to be starting with you, Nicole. Some proposed bills that would have been useful to rural areas never made it to the floor. How will you work to get bills heard, even if they might not pass?
That's a good question. I wonder what specific that person had in mind. Like I had mentioned earlier with volunteer firefighters, seeing that bill not be prioritized is probably a good one, because I think it's the least we can do for our volunteer firefighters, and we rely heavily on them. And every one of us was affected in the state in 2020. And so I think, and it's different when you're actually working in Salem. I had a representative who didn't think the same way as I did in a lot of things, but he was very kind, his staff was kind, and they listened, and I felt was rational. And so I think that people, maybe people don't realize that the people that work in the Capitol actually do negotiate, they do work across the aisle. And so I think I would just, use my skills of I think I'm good at explaining how people feel and informing perspectives, so I would work in that area.
And Caleb, same question for you. How will you work to get bills heard, even if they might not pass?
I think this is the main issue that kind of boiled down why I wanted to run. I don't feel like the representation was there in that specific way. So this is very important to me, that I want to make sure that people's voices are heard, and that even if something doesn't have the traction to have a result that session, because sometimes you just don't have the time, it's very important to cut through the red tape to make sure those things are seen and heard. And I would go out of my way to make sure that I do present those things to as many people as possible, and make sure that we can have those discussions openly and honestly about moving forward with those ideas and making those changes and assessing what can be done to make it a priority.
Okay. And Jeff, for you as well, how will you work to get bills heard, even if they might not pass?
I think if they don't get heard on the first time, it's going back and rewriting it to figure out what you have to change on it to make it where it gets heard. So even if it doesn't pass, at least it's on the floor and on the table to talk about it. So it's doing the research to find out why it failed in the first place and bring it back in a different way that gets the intent of what you wanted, but at least get it listened to.
And same question for you, Charlie.
I think some of that is deals with the system as it's a systematic issue. The volume of bills that the legislature has proposed every year, not all of them are going to get heard. And in order to make any one of those rise to the top to at least get a hearing or discussed in a committee, it takes effort. And one of the things that a representative needs to do is effort. This is not a 7-month, every 2-year job during session. This is 24 months, working hard, building that background support. So in the off time from the session, building that support. So if you have an issue that is relevant, that needs to get to that floor, you're politicking, you're working with everybody else across the aisle to get that support, so at least you get that hearing, you get it out there. So this position takes a lot of energy, a lot of time, and it's putting that forward to make that happen and being a champion for the rural community. Practical, reasonable, and responsible.
So we have another question from the audience, and Caleb, you're going to start with this one. We have a looming farm crisis. Some farm owners who want to retire and only buyers for farms or conglomerates. How would you keep small farm character and local control of farms in Oregon?
This kind of ties into what I was talking about earlier with the same issue in the housing market. Large corporations and conglomerates buying up houses to turn into, much more expensive situations there. So same thing, I think there need to be incentives to remove the barriers and to reward those people who are willing to take on that job. There's no reason to punish those people who are willing to get their hands dirty, and those tax incentives and subsidy incentives that exist need to be broadened and maybe just reviewed to make that barrier to entry lower for those who may want to take up this mantle.
Thank you. And Jeff, same question for you. How can we keep small farm character and local control of farms in Oregon?
Yeah, and I think I agree. Those are all private sector. And so if it's figuring out a way to make it appealing for a small business owner to acquire a farm and run it, if all you're getting is the conglomerates to take over, there's got to be a reason why the little guy isn't doing it. So it's finding the incentives to make that profitable for them where they can hold a small independent farm and make it financially work for them and serve the community as well.
And same question for you, Charlie, about keeping local control of farms.
So much of that is actually going to depend on talking to local farmers and having them involved, finding out what the barriers are. You know, they work on a very small profit margin, and the more that the state can do to reduce the barriers, increase their profit margin, and make it so that they can have an efficient business, that they can operate an efficient business, and that they're encouraged to continue doing that. If they sell out, they're selling for a reason. And being able to articulate what that reason is and backtracking from there to figure out how we can help support them and encourage that to happen, because they are a backbone of our rural communities.
All right, thank you. And Nicole, how would you help to keep small farms' character and local control of farms in Oregon?
Well, first of all, I know this is controversial. House Bill 4002 was the ag overtime bill. And if you want to support farmers, then don't pass bills that are going to force some farmers to flee. You know, we had a farm, and I know that farmers they innovate. They if they're allowed to do what they do best, then they can innovate, and they will have incentives to stay. You know, we had a farm, and we had most of it was cattle, and then we switched to having horse riding and horse adjustment, and then I also raised butterflies. So farmers and people that are close to the earth, they are going to think about things that are going to, first of all, you know, provide education and, you know, to the community and provide value, but they're also going to want to make a living doing that farm work. So I think we need to support our farmers with good decisions that don't create barriers.
All right, thank you. We're getting short on time, so for this last question, I'm only going to give you 30 seconds. And hopefully it'll be a quick one to answer. We're going to be starting with you, Jeff. Oregonians have voted by mail for more than 20 years. Do you support Oregon's current election system?
I wish we had the option for in-person or vote by mail. As long as the voting is fair and it's tracked good, I'm okay with it. I personally, I like the convenience of it. I get the ballot early and I can take it and turn it in at my convenience, but I do miss standing and punching the little holes in there, so I wish we had both options.
Thank you. And Charlie, again, just do you support Oregon's current election system?
I do, and I agree with Jeff that, you know, having an option to vote in person is a good thing to have. You know, one of the things I really support is people to have options and opportunities and encourage that participation. So if there's a way we can get more people to participate in voting by having in person, I fully support that, and I like our system as we have it now.
Thank you. Nicole, also, do you support Oregon's current election system?
Yes, I do mostly. I think both sides need, or all of us need to feel confident in our voting system, and it doesn't benefit anyone when one side doesn't view it as fair and accurate. And so maybe regular audits is good, but I don't know if it's an unpopular opinion, but it's not going to be 100%. I do like the idea of giving people the option to mail in, because there's people that aren't going to be able to physically go in and vote. I would like both options, but you know, there are issues that, okay.
Thank you, Nicole. And Caleb, you get the last word on this one. Do you support Oregon's current election system?
I do. I love mail-in voting, but I would love to see higher voter turnout. So I don't know if that's in-person voting or maybe a change, but I think it definitely needs to be addressed in a cohesive way, and we need to find out what would make those numbers go up before we make a change to just saying, okay, let's add in-person voting.
Well, now it's time for your closing statements, and you'll each have 1 minute, and we're going to go in reverse order from how we did the opening statements. So Nicole Mcgrath, running for House District 12, you get to go first.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity to come to this forum. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to come, but I'm glad it worked out. You know, my perspective wanting to raise my kids in a better Oregon, I think is shared by a lot of people. A lot of us have the same thoughts and ideas about problems are, and I just would like to help provide solutions. I was an executive director for a nonprofit, so I wasn't a politician and I didn't work for the government, but I've been in the trenches with my community since about 7 years, working on parental rights and school issues. I was on a school board, and I would just like to serve my community further in that area. And I just hope that folks listening would be encouraged to tell their friends and family to please vote. And you know, we need to have better transparency in all avenues of our government. And I do care and have a heart for future generations of District 12. So thank you.
Thank you. Now, Charlie Conrad, also running for House District 12.
Thank you, and thank you for the great questions. I've enjoyed answering them, and I've enjoyed listening to the other responses from the other candidates. I'd like to tie this back to my opening statement. Oregon needs a master plan. We need direction, we need purpose, and we need to have the steps to get there. As the questions demonstrated, there are a wide variety of issues affecting all aspects of our society as we go forward. Specifically, some of them that I want to work on are the basics, the things that impact people on a daily basis. Public safety, the economy, making sure that people have an opportunity for careers, for well-paying careers, that they can raise their families, and for education, so that our children are educated, so that when they graduate, that they have opportunities going forward and can raise their families, and that they want to stay in Oregon. We need some stability, and we need some practical, rational, reasonable conversations in the legislature, and we need to have some action, and we need to have a purpose. And you know, we've got a lot of potential, we've got a lot of opportunity, and I'm excited for where Oregon can go from here with the right people in office. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Gowing, again, your closing statement, and Jeff is also running for House District 12.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to be here and talk. The way I want to continue is the same way I've been running as a mayor. I have a open policy to meet with everybody. I am accessible. I give out my phone number on the radio. It's on the website. Anytime that you could want to talk with me, I make it available, and that's this would be my full-time job. I'm in a situation where I can afford to not work and be out in the community, and it is a 365-day-a-year job. It's not just while you're in session. So I will be out in the communities working and talking to people even when I'm not in session. So that's why I think I would be the best candidate to vote for.
Thank you. Caleb Clark is running for House District 14.
I just want to thank everybody for being here and for the City Club Eugene for putting this on, and thank you for your questions. If you asked me a year ago if I'd be doing this, I never would have crossed my mind. But I saw a need, and I want to be able to put forth my best effort to do this. And through the school board and the progression of the last couple years of what I've been working on and seeing and interacting with the community, I see it as something I can do, and I want to be able to make that change possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That wraps up the candidate forum with candidates for House District 14 and House District 12. I'm Rachel McDonald with KLCC, and now I'll hand it back to Kitty.
Thank you very much. This has been our May 6, 2022 program, Candidate Forum, Republican Candidates for the House. I'd like to recognize our diamond sponsors. Kaiser Permanente exists to provide high-quality, affordable health care services and to improve the health of our members and the community we serve. More information is available at www.kp.org. University of Oregon has helped Oregonians question critically, think logically, reason effectively, communicate clearly, act creatively, and live ethically since 1876. Get more information at uoregon.edu. Peace Health has been proud to serve Eugene, Lane County, and beyond as your hometown healthcare partner for more than 80 years. The Peace Health mission is to keep you and your family healthy. Learn more at peacehealth.org. Lane Community College transforms lives through learning. LCC provides comprehensive, accessible, high-quality educational opportunities that promote student success. For more information, visit lanecc.edu. We are also grateful for generous support from the City of Eugene and from Lane County. I would like to acknowledge our Ruby sponsor, Johnson, Johnson, Lucas & Middleton. Support for the City Club comes from Johnson, Johnson, Lucas & Middleton, a team of experienced, compassionate attorneys fighting for justice. If you have been seriously harmed by wrongdoing and need help, contact us at justicelawyers.com. Today's gold sponsors are Headshots Eugene and Pacific Cascade Federal Credit Union. Thank you to our in-kind sponsors, KRVM 91.9 Radio, PAC Info and Simplified Computing, LLC, Dotson's Photography, and a special thank you to the public radio station KLCC FM 89.7 for airing City Club programs on Mondays at 7. Our programs are always available on our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, and our podcast. We invite all the listeners today, all those who are watching, members and non-members, to participate in our programs in person at our new venue, First United Methodist Church at 1376 Olive, or by live stream on our YouTube page. More information is on our website, cityclubofeugene.org. Next week, we'll be having students from the University of Oregon presenting their undergraduate research projects. That'll be pretty interesting. UVO Women in Science, our annual celebration of undergrad research. Please join us next Friday. More details and information about future programs can be found online at the City Club's website, cityclubofeugene.org. So now I just want to say to you guys, thank you so much for being here. On behalf of all of us, I think you've done a great job. Very clear and very well spoken. Appreciate you being here. Okay, so I'm going to thank, thank you. So thank you, Charlie Conrad, Nicole Mcgrath, Jeff Gowing, and for House District 14, Caleb Clark, for a great program. That concludes today's program. Be well, be safe, and enjoy your weekend.
That's good. I can talk a lot, so the fact that I didn't get